We are extremely excited to be here today at the 2019 SheBelieves Summit here at Nike New York headquarters. What an amazing experience for all of you to be here. Today, my colleague Jamie Cameron and I are going to talk to you about energy for life. We're going to have a lively discussion, an interactive discussion. Super excited for you guys to be here. With that, my name is Alana Hoskin, and I'm a partner and our consumer talent leader at Deloitte. What that means is I work with multinational companies, working with the leaders to help solve some of their most complex challenges. Internally, I'm our consumer talent leader, where I help retain, nurture, and promote our professionals, especially empowering women. Such a passion of mine. I grew up in Los Angeles, where I was a competitive gymnast for 14 years. I went to an all-girls school, the Marlboro School for Girls, where I was an athlete. I continued my gymnastics competition, and I was the captain of our gymnastics team and the track and field team. Unfortunately, my junior year of high school, I had a career-ending knee injury, which made me put gymnastics aside, but I used all those techniques in the foundation in athletics to start rowing lightweight crew for UCLA junior rowing team. I was recruited by Villanova University, where I was an NCAA athlete, rowing lightweight crew, and had a fabulous experience. I majored in business, and I used all that foundation that I learned in athletics and transitioned that to here at Deloitte, where I started back in 2000. Incredible journey so far. I've been able to lead teams, work with our people. That's a passion of mine, especially empowering the women in our firm. Today, I'm an athlete. I run marathons. I've ran Boston and New York. I'm a yogi, and I do adventure races, and I bring that to my teams and incorporate that into my everyday life. So with that, hand it over to Jamie.
Hi, guys. Alana and I have a lot in common. Being able to run 26 miles is not one of those things. I'll give you guys my story, started from the bottom up. So in high school, I was a competitive ballerina. That also means I had no hand-eye coordination, but my schedule was completely based around athletics. It's kind of a way you live, you know? You begin to schedule the rest of your life around your different commitments to sports. When I went to college, I stopped doing ballet. It wasn't my degree, and it's a little bit harder to sort of recreationally do dance when you're in college, and it actually really messed with my schedule. I didn't have the sort of structure that I was used to, and so I found myself with like long periods of time that I didn't know how to use. I was in a dining hall eating like bagels every single day. There was a lot of different things that had changed in that time. Thankfully, also in college, I found yoga, which sort of helped me replace that as a physical practice. And I'm now a yoga teacher. I also went through a program to teach meditation at large organizations like Deloitte, where we both work. So I kind of found my way out, but it was using some of these energy management principles that we're going to talk about today and figuring out how to take them out of one context, the context of high school, and put them into college, and then again do that as I joined the workforce. So much of today is going to be talking about skills that many of you already have and how we then apply those to the sort of next challenge on the horizon. So something else that Alana and I do have in common is our love of handstands. So we were each submitting a picture. It looks like the slides want to go faster than I did. So, Alana, could you pull the computer out while I share our handstand story? So we both submitted a picture of like doing something athletic that we loved and had no idea that we were going to submit those identical pictures, which opened up a really fun conversation. Like, what is the significance of a handstand? You know, what does that mean to each of us? And it actually is more symbolic than like that cool moment where you're upside down and like, yeah, that's on my Instagram and it got more likes than my other pictures. What it really has always meant for me is about finding the line of challenge, right? There's this idea of sometimes we don't quite rise to it. In a handstand, that's you just falling back down. There's also a moment where you test the edge and you go over, right? You fall. Every once in a while, you really push on something and it doesn't work out the way that you wanted. And then there's this like really incredible place right in between where you're pushing your own personal edge and you found that sort of moment of balance. So it's not about a career of constant balance. You can't hold the handstand that long, but it is about constantly pressing this edge, coming back and forth off of what that means. Alana has a slightly different story about what handstands mean to her.
Yeah, so being a competitive gymnast for so long, handstands were part of my routine on a daily basis, part of my workouts all the time. So it was more of, I created that foundation with the handstands, but today, what it means to me is balance. And so when my mind's fuzzy or I just need to, think clearer or be more innovative or more inspirational, I'll actually kick up into a handstand. And there's a couple other things that I do, and we'll talk about those later. But for handstands, balance is what it means to me.
So it's pretty incredible. We can learn so much through our physical body, and that's what we're going to talk about today is starting with the physical body, how do we learn to manage our energy? The first thing to understand is that there's what we call a human energy crisis going on. This is, I'll close my eyes. Raise your hand if this has been you at some point before. Yeah, yes. Okay. There's this perpetual state of tiredness, and I think we oftentimes come to think that that's normal or that's just part of the gig, but it's problematic over time, right? You're being worn down. The energy crisis is not having the energy that you need in the moments that you need it. So it's not about being 100% all the time. It's not about being always on and never sleeping. It's about in the moments where there's a requirement of you, whether it's a game or a presentation, anything else big that's going on in your life, do you have that reserve of energy to use when you need it? And when we try and go forever at 100%, we don't, right? We're depleting that store of energy. So here's a graph, not quite as precise as the ones you'd see in econ. But what we're looking at here is that over time, the demands on our energy are going to increase. Okay, raise your hand if you think that you have sort of a lot of demands on your life right now. Okay, put your hand down if you think those will decrease in the next 5 years. No way, right? We're all going to go on, and we're going on to different jobs, and even once you're in a job, you're constantly trying to grow as a leader, right? There's no sort of magical moment when the sort of challenges of life just fall away. Maybe retirement. We're not there yet. We'll talk about that. That'll be another presentation. See you guys in 20 years. So the demands on our energy continue to grow, and what we're really trying to find is that sweet spot, the circle you see on the slide, where the capacity of our energy, which sadly decreases over time as we age, that's just a fact of being human, right? We're trying to do things that help our energy capacity meet the demands on it, that sweet spot right in the center. Anything to the right of that, you could call that like being overwhelmed or burnout. And so what we're really trying to do is create ways to generate energy that land us right in the center. So Alana's going to share a little story about how this looked in her personal journey.
So all of you know how to manage your energy for a game, right? And in the real world and in the workforce, there's some stories that, when I first started Deloitte, I thought I had to be busy all the time, 100% of the time. And, I was an athlete. I was just like you guys in terms of always going to practice, having competitions. And so with that transition, I brought those techniques and tools, but I didn't realize that you didn't have to be busy 100% of the time. And so what I did was I worked with my mentors, I worked with my team members, and made sure that I was always making time for myself. But it's hard sometimes because you're given activities, you're given tasks, and there's so many things that you need to get done. And sometimes you just want to raise your hand. And there's pros and cons to that. There's tons of opportunity once you transition into the workforce. But just make sure you have time for yourself and for others. And really, really be aware of the energy that you're expending and your energy that you're giving to yourself and taking.
There's this sort of an unfortunate phrase that people say all the time, which is it's a marathon, not a sprint. But any of you who are training know that it's not all marathons. In fact, generally you're training in periods of high intensity followed by rest, right? That's how we build our our capabilities. And so the same thing applies here. It's not about thinking of it as a 100% marathon. It wouldn't have been possible. There's a lot of opportunity, but more than one Alana can achieve in a lifetime, right? But thinking about it as a series of sprints with strategic rest in between. The reason we talk about it like this is that time is a limited resource. There's a lot of focus on time management, and skills like that can help you, right? They're useful, but we're still all working with 24 hours a day, right? No one has yet figured out how to crack that code. Energy is different, on the other hand. It's not constrained at 24 hours, right? It's the sort of unlimited source or power that we have internally. And again, we're going to learn how to manage it to have it in the moments that it's needed. So there's 4 elements of energy that we're going to talk about today. The first one's the one that we all get normally, which is the body or physical energy. We think about that all the time. It's, how you sleep, how much energy you have when you're exercising, when you're performing. So we'll give you guys some hints about physical energy. Many of you know how to train athletically, but we'll talk about ones that are more specific to going through a workday. And then we'll also talk about sort of an energy we don't always think about, which is emotional energy, or you can think of this as the heart. So you might have noticed that if something sort of emotionally negative happens, if something that's really hard happens to you, it affects the rest of your energy, right? There's that sort of sluggishness or, weight to what you're doing. And the opposite's true too, right? If something emotionally amazing happens to you, you're like on top of the world. You have all this energy. So we're going to talk about how we begin to process our emotional energy. After that, we'll talk about tips for mental energy management. Bad mental energy management would be like, you going down to do some homework or work on an essay and instead going on Facebook for a really long time and then like text messaging your friends and then like thinking you should call your mom. That would be your mind everywhere, not using that energy well. And then the last piece we'll talk about really quickly today is this idea of purpose. When you're aligned to what you're doing, when it matters to you, when it has meaning, that provides its own sense of energy that infuses all the other levels. So we'll go through all 4 of these. Now, my slides are still advancing without me, so I'm going to pause just for a moment because I'm sure there's a fix to this. Help. Okay, well, you guys, we're just going to keep clicking on them then. So we are here. Okay. So the goal of all of this is to hit what we're going to call full engagement, the acquired ability to intentionally invest your full and best energy right here, right now. So what gets in the way, right? Like ideally, we would just all be able to do it. Let's talk a little bit about how we sort of misspend our energy. It's really helpful to think of it as maybe like a bank account, like you have your own personal bank account of energy, and there's sort of 2 ways that we misuse it. One would be poor energy management. This is like when you go online shopping for one thing and buy 20 things, right? You have the resource of energy, but you're spending it in ways that don't help you, that don't regenerate. The other way is insufficient energy management. That's an empty bank account, right? That's when you're on 0 and you've got nothing to draw from. And I think you want to talk about energy sinkholes, right?
I do. So how many people in the room, are there certain things during school that kind of drain your energy? Okay, so everyone has to do homework. Everyone has to study for tests. That's all table stakes, right? And then you have to practice for games, tournaments. When you get to the workforce and you transition, there's certain things that you just have to do. And in my experience, early in my career, there were certain table stakes that you just have to get through. But there are certain things as you move through your career that you need to be aware of that are taking your energy. And it's those things that working with your mentors and your managers and being transparent. Transparency is so important because you need to get up every morning and be passionate about what you're doing. And so really work with your team and your managers and those around you so that you can get that energy. And so you're doing things that you're really passionate about. Super important in the workforce.
Yeah, I mean, some energy drains are unavoidable, but some are, right? Some are. So just to make sure we're really understanding what this poor energy management things looks like, we'll put a question out to you. You can just raise your hand. Give us some personal examples of what poor energy management has looked like in your life. Raise your hand. How are you misspending or misusing your energy? Procrastinating, that's an awesome one. And what do you normally do when you're procrastinating? Like if you really don't want to do something, what's your go-to other thing to do? Right, but it sounds like really important. Like I really need to clean my room right now. Great example of how we misspend mental energy, right? Like we know we need to focus, and instead we're like, I'm going to scroll endlessly on Facebook for a while or whatever it is. What else, guys? How else do you misspend energy? Yeah. Ooh.
And we're going to talk about sleep today.
Yeah. Yeah, sleep, big energy drain, right? What else, guys? Other examples? All the way back, yeah. Ooh. Yeah, so how about like on the emotional energy level, the feeling of dread, right? Like it's not even only about the time that you're spending doing it, but that sort of like, ugh, feeling that you get. How draining is that? Oh, great example. And there was one up here too, right?
Yeah, a lot of times when I try to maximize so much, so like if I'm trying to pick a restaurant, I go through pages and pages of Yelp trying to find the absolute perfect restaurant when it doesn't exist, and I just end up not being able to make a decision.
Yeah, that's another really good one, right? Like you're trying so hard to fit everything in to like increase. It's like it's the whole time versus energy story, right? Like you're trying to maximize time so much that you actually end up wasting it, right? You actually end up using it. Okay, perfect examples. So what's the solution, right? Like what are we really talking about here? It's that sprint recovery attitude I mentioned earlier. It's this idea that we want to oscillate between moments of stress, which is us spending energy or energy out, and recovery, which is energy in. The first thing to know is that stress is not necessarily bad. It's like this dirty word, you know, like none of us want stress. But stress is also what helps us grow, right? It's the challenges in our life that help us like transform into the next version of ourselves. The problem is when we think we can do this stress line upwards forever. Like we could just have this slope that would go on and on and on. It doesn't. At a certain point, it's going to cap out, and you're going to enter what's called forced recovery. This is shutdown, right? This is when, has anyone ever like fallen asleep and woken up way, way later than they wanted to? That's like a very small example of what forced recovery would look like. So even if we think that we can do 100% all the time, the body can't. It's going to send us down in the recovery, and it's not going to be when and where we want it. It's going to be when the body absolutely needs it. So the idea here in all of these dimensions, physical, emotional, mental, and in purpose, is to balance the moments of challenge that help us grow with moments of recovery. So let's take a couple minutes and brainstorm some examples of recovery strategies. What are things that you might already be doing to help yourself recover on any of those levels?
Over there. And you feel good after, right? Yeah. That's another one. What about over here?
Sometimes, like when I spend long amounts of time inside studying, sometimes I just go outside, get some sunlight, and just like take a deep breath so I can like gather myself and kind of take my mind off of my responsibilities, just so I can like get myself calm.
Out of curiosity, where are you from? Jersey. Okay. Yeah, I'm from Chicago, and like at this time of year, it's like so hard to get those moments of like outdoor recovery, but they're beautiful. They hit us on all the levels, right? They feel good physically, emotionally, mentally. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Francesca. I feel like when you get in those ruts of like studying for hours and hours, you just need to like sit back, acknowledge like what you've done and what you've achieved, and that. Oh, okay. Hello. I feel like when you overwork yourself, you feel like you've done nothing or like you haven't done enough. And I think that sometimes you need to just sit back and like acknowledge what you've accomplished and that you have done something and that you're deserving of that time. And I think just that in itself is like helps me recover and be like, you put in the work and you need a break and you deserve a break because you've done all of this thus far.
Yeah, awesome example. Curious if anyone has an example of what sort of on a purpose level they do to help reconnect with what's most important to them.
I'm loud, but kind of going off of like what we were talking about is like taking the downtime that's kind of forced I live in New Jersey and I work here in the city. So I have a very long commute. So that's kind of like forced downtime. So I use that time to like reflect, like, listen to my tunes. So it kind of seems like a waste of time. Like, oh my gosh, this commute is so long. It's such a waste. I could be doing so many other things. But you use that to like reflect on your day, or reflect on like what you're going to do that day. So I think that's a really good use of like downtime.
Yeah, awesome. How many people have like a picture on their background of something they really love, like on their phone? Yeah, like for me, that's like the quickest purpose check-in, right? Like for me, it's my dog, my adorable little dog who's, cuddled up, and it's that moment of another thing we have in common. And so it's just that moment of checking back in. So now we're gonna get really tactical. We're gonna start talking about the tools and tips, and Alana's gonna kick us off with the physical recovery tips.
So the physical recovery dimension, this is really, really important. We can go to the next slide, actually. So there's a few techniques in terms of physical recovery strategies, and I'm sure you all do this today, but there's little things that you can remember and where you are today in college and as you transitioned into the workforce. Little things like when you're studying, how many people get up and move around for 10 to 15 minutes after a while? You guys, okay, so you already have this. I mean, these are principles that you can transition into the workforce, and they're life skills. I do the same thing. I mean, we travel a lot at Deloitte, and we're in team rooms with our teams, and we're working hard and long hours. And that's one of the things that we really make sure, and all of my team, and they know, because this is my leadership style in terms of bringing this to the teams that I work with, is get up every 30 to 45 minutes and walk around for 10 to 15 minutes. One of my clients in Oregon, we go for runs. We walk around campus. We walk around the track. We do things and connect just for little movements throughout the day. It makes such a big difference. Okay, I think I mentioned sleep earlier. This is something that Jamie knows I'm super passionate about. Early in my career, I actually thought that you had to work for hours and hours and hours, and you had to raise your hand for everything after your workday is done, and that would create opportunity. It does, so there's pros and cons, again, of raising your hand. But what I didn't realize is how much sleep impacted your daily life. So important. It's that one period of time where you're not moving. You're repairing cells in your body. A lot of you are athletes, and that's really important. One of the things that I have as a ritual every night is I go to bed from 8:30 to 9:30 every single night. And I started this about 6 years ago. So it took me a little bit of time to actually put a routine in place. But it's something that my teams know, too, that it's really important to take time for yourself at night. I didn't mention a story earlier on, and it's really talking about quality versus quantity. Our teams work long hours sometimes, and we do a lot of team events. And, every week we would have a team dinner on one of my clients with, all the team members that are on the ground every day. And we thought that every week we had to have a team dinner. We didn't realize that a lot of us were scheduling our time just to go to the team dinner. So it was taking energy away, even though we wanted to be with each other. And so one of the managers on the team, she said, and we're very transparent. We talk all the time and just how we're feeling and what's giving us energy, what's taking energy. And she said, why don't we do 10 to 15 minute increments where we're one-on-one and we get that quality time. And so the point of this and how it relates to sleep is at nighttime, we didn't necessarily have to schedule those dinners. We had time for ourselves, whether it's to work out, meditate, read, whatever that person wanted to do, and create some structure around sleep, because it's really important for clearing your mind. And if any of you are like me, I wake up every morning and I go running. Running is something that just clears my mind, and I'm able to focus and be present. And sleep is really important.
Yeah. So let's talk about the emotional dimension, sort of moving on to some of these less familiar strategies. So we can, excuse me, we're going to begin to think of emotions in two ways. One is the amount of energy they take. There's high energy emotions that require a lot of our energy, and ones that are lower. So lots of energy, a little energy. And the other dimension we can begin to think about them is positive or negative, right? Certain emotions have a sort of like good feeling to them, and other ones don't feel as enjoyable. Something important to know is that emotional management is not about never feeling negative emotions. We're humans, and like the various things that we'll all experience in life will cause these emotions, and that's perfectly normal and in fact healthy to do so. So it's not about avoiding the negative or being, forced optimistic, like happy all the time. It's simply about being able to be aware of where we are at any given moment and notice if we need to begin to shift. So I'm going to talk about each of these quadrants, and it looks like we've got a little shading problem, but imagine this as a grid where it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So on the top right corner, 1 is high energy positive emotions. Really quick, just shout out, what's a high energy positive emotion? Thrilled, love it. Happy, yes, thank you. One more? Excited. Yeah, we get this one, right? These are like the really fun. This is like when you're like about to pump your team up and you're like giving the pep talk, like you're up in quadrant 1, these high positive emotions. So what we're looking over here is the top left. What would high energy negative emotions be? High negative. Annoyed. Yeah, I love that one. Scared. Yeah, fear-based emotions. Completely.
Stressed?
Ooh,
Yes.
Stress, anger, frustration, all that stuff is up in that top corner, right? Like they take a lot of your energy and they don't feel so good. Let's talk about what would be the sort of bottom left here, low energy negative emotions. What are those? What are the ones that feel low and also negative? Exhaustion. Sadness. Yep. Grief. Again, there's a time and there's so many good reasons that we experience these emotions. And yet it's important to be aware of that's where I am right now. Our final quadrant 4, is the one that we tend to ignore. So these would be low energy but positive emotions. What are some words you would put in that quadrant? Relaxed, yes. What else? Calm, yeah, calm. Perfect. So I'll flip it, and it has an example of some of our words. So this idea is that at any given moment, we can kind of assess or understand where we are on these 2 different dimensions. And the ignored one is this bottom right corner. And guess what? That's the one where recovery happens. When we've been up in our high emotions much too long, we might be forced down. And oftentimes, when we hit forced recovery, it goes like this. Down to the bottom left, exhaustion, burnout, all of those negative categories. Instead, we want to try and make sure we edge our way into this bottom right quadrant from time to time, because that's where we restore our emotional energy. Right down there is where we sort of begin to refuel ourselves on an emotional level, is in those moments of relaxation and calm. Sounds great. How do we do it?
So, emotional recovery strategies. So these are some that I'm sure a lot of you feel when you're kind of you have your emotional recovery strategies. I want to take a couple of minutes for everyone to take out their phones, their smartphones.
No, seriously, it's not a trick. Like you can take out your smartphone.
Yeah. So take out your smartphones and think about someone that's done something for you that you want to thank them for, or you saw someone do something for someone else, and you just want to send a note of thanks, a note of gratitude, either a text or an email. So take a minute and think about that, and then after we'll see how everyone feels.
So go ahead, send a thank you text to somebody.
Okay. Has everyone something? How does it make you feel?
Yeah, it just makes you feel like you have someone there that is there for you and thinks about you as well, and kind of makes you feel grateful.
Anyone else? Does it boost your morale? Like, do you feel like you're getting energy? That's really important. I think, when we're working, I'm working with my teams. That's something that I try to instill in all of the team members. Is how do you make people feel good too? There's a lot of people have mentors, right, in this room, and a lot of mentors have done so many great things for us. But you can have to continue to pay that forward. And I think incorporating that into your work life. Super important, and it makes you feel good. We do on a lot of my clients, all of our teams actually. We do weekly shout outs to recognize people for something that they did that week, or newsletters where they're getting recognized, or we're seeing the team members do something that's helping others. It's really important, and it boosts morale and it gives you energy.
So let's talk about the mind dimension for a little bit. And I think this one we understand a lot. Like, we understand what it feels like to not be using our energy well in the mental dimension.
So multitasking. How many people multitask in this room? Okay, I'm going to raise my hand too. It's something that when we're multitasking, we're not at our best. We're at our best when we're present and when we're focused, laser focused, right? And so it's something that we always have to remember that, when multitasking prevents us from being present in the moment, we're not going to probably be able to accomplish that activity or task or practice or game the best that we can. And so just really thinking about different strategies around multitasking is really important. In terms of, when I get up in the morning, I go for a run. There's certain things where my mind there's a million things going on, in a work day at Deloitte. And what I do to really clear my mind is go for a run. I talked about handstands, so yes, I do kick up into a handstand for balance sometimes. But for me, going for a run, I can focus on one thing, the entire process, and really visualize that outcome. And it's really important for us to be aware and make sure that you're creating the time for yourself, and then you're not doing too much, because if we do too much, we're not going to do anything well, right? Does anyone have any examples of that? No.
Has anyone tried meditation?
I think you're going to be in luck, because Jamie's going to walk you through an exercise.
So a couple suggestions here. Something as simple as talking to a friend. Writing or journaling, and thinking through things intentionally, not in that sort of like endless hamster wheel, but taking time to think through, and then meditation and deep breathing. So we're actually going to do an exercise right now. It'll be very short, I promise, as least boring as possible, but it'd be nice if you put your stuff on the table just so that you could sit comfortably and sort of turn into your chair into a posture that makes you feel nice and comfortable. You can put your hands on your lap, feet on the ground, and you can look down, or you can even close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Otherwise, just gazing softly down. And let's take a huge breath to begin. Inhaling through the nose and out the mouth. Let's take one more of those. Big in and big exhale. We're going to begin to inhale slowly. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath at the top. 2, 3, 4. Exhale slowly. 3, 4. Hold at the bottom. 2, 3, 4. Inhale slowly. Hold at the top. Exhale. Hold at the bottom. Last time, inhale and hold. Exhale. Hold. Big breath in. Exhale out the mouth. And you can blink your eyes open and turn back to the front of the room. The purpose of an exercise like this is that the moments of retaining the bottom of the breath are shortening our oxygen supply, And when the body processes it's not getting oxygen, it goes, whoa, slow down, heart rate, slow down a little bit. We don't have enough resources to go through this. So this can be really helpful if you're in a moment where you feel nervous. Anything that sort of makes you feel like your heart is beating out of your chest, anxious or nervous, exercises like this can really help use the body to actually calm down. So there's just one example of what a 30-second mental recovery break might look like when you're in the thick of it, right? When you're really in those moments when you feel most stressed. So we'll talk about our last dimension here, which is the purpose dimension. As Alana and I joked, sadly, we cannot solve the meaning of your life in a 45-minute conference session. Not possible. But we can talk a little bit about what this looks like and what this means. So one important thing is that as we begin to energize ourselves on the first 3 levels, body, heart, and mind, as we gain clarity in those elements, it often helps us understand or see what that purpose is at the top more clearly, right? What is it that really matters to us? What brings us to life? Once we connect to that sort of source or purpose at the top, it then fuels back down all the other levels. When you're working on something that you're connected to, that you find meaningful, that's helping, you get this sense of energy that comes back down mentally, emotionally, and physically to recharge you. So what does that look like? I'll give you guys a short personal story about how this looked like when I was first beginning my career at Deloitte. I was on a project where I was traveling to a very rural place in Michigan, so rural that although I am from Michigan, I had no idea where it was. And I was helping them create a lot of training material for people who worked in a warehouse. So it was a manufacturing project. They worked in a warehouse. They would use little RF scanners to stack and unstack boxes as they received them. And so I'm going through truly thousands of pages of training material, making all these small grammatical edits, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is it? Like, all this college, and here I am, editing these small things. So fast forward, we began our training program, and the first day we bring in all these warehouse men and women to the training. They're sitting in front of computers, and we say, type in your username, and then click log in. And someone picks up the mouse and presses it on the computer to click log in. And in the moment, what I realized is like we're not like teaching people the words that I was writing. We're giving people the skills to continue to have jobs into the next 20, 40 years. And that sense of purpose, that moment of understanding, like this is what I'm doing, gave me the energy to continue to work and excel in that role. So sometimes purpose is just that moment of insight when you see what it is that you're really doing, right? When you see a team member smile. So that's all we're going to say about purpose today, because we want to spend the last few minutes we have with you talking about how we make some of these into habits.
So this is the section around, hopefully we can have all of you take some rituals and routines back to your daily lives and incorporate after this session today. But we're all creatures of habits. We all think in terms of more non-conscious and automatic behaviors. Things just happen, right? And so we have to work on making sure that what we're going to do, what those routines and those rituals, that we're sticking with them. Because sometimes they just happen, right? And so we have to either get out of the bad habits and make new habits. I think some of the, let's see here. Some of the rituals that we talk about, and especially at Deloitte, because it helps us in the daily workforce. We're really busy. We talked about your day. You have to really prioritize and be aware of what you're working on. So things like journaling for 5 minutes, and we've talked about some of these things today. Turning your cell phone off for dinner, being present. We talked about being present and not multitasking. Who brings their cell phone to dinner? Okay, I used to. I've actually stopped doing that because I'm not present. I'm not present there with everyone around me. There's other rituals up here in terms of reflecting on your mission for 5 minutes during the day. Thinking about purpose, and thinking about what is your objective? What's your purpose? Taking that time out of the day. So setting rituals, and I talked about my ritual, my sleep ritual at night. I have a ritual of running in the morning. I run with my teams, and my teams now have taken those techniques and tools and incorporated into their lives, and it's paying it forward as well. So it's being aware, and it's setting those rituals. So, just one or two. And Jamie, what are some of your rituals?
Okay, so the first time I learned this content was a long time ago, and here's some of the rituals that I have like set in place since. I do 5 minutes of meditation or breathing every morning. I mean, you miss some mornings. Like I'm not 100%. I'm probably like 90%, and that seems pretty good to me. But before the sort of craziness of the day begins, it's 5 minutes to do that. You know what's funny is a long time ago when I actually started at 2 minutes because someone told me like pick an amount of time so small that you would feel silly not doing it. Right? Instead of like going for some like stretch goal, like I'm gonna meditate for 30 minutes every morning that you'll never do, pick something so easy that you would be like, you know, there's really no excuse for not making 2 minutes in your day to do something. So that's how that one started for me. And then another ritual I set is not having my phone face up when I'm in conversation. Right? Like as simple as like, even if it has to be out there, even if my friend's on the table, like it's down, right? Like it is just not in my line of sight if I'm interacting with somebody else. So those are two I made.
And the technology piece of it is important. And going back to sleep, one of the things that I started doing is putting my phone on my side table in the little in the drawer. Because what I found was at night I was always stuck on that smartphone, and it was almost like the firefly syndrome in terms of you'd see these little lights, and it was hard to get to sleep. And so I stopped. I put my phone away, and for that hour I either meditate, I read, I write on a piece of paper, in a journal, and it's things like that, and it actually makes me get to bed a lot easier. I know some people use apps. For me, that's just something that I started not doing just because of the technology and the lights, and it's easier for me to sleep that way.
I just remembered one more too. I almost always keep a little sticky on my computer that says, "What's important right now?" And that's like for me also one of those sort of purpose check-ins, right? It's like there's always all this crazy going on, but what's important right now in this moment? And sometimes the answer is, you know, studying for the test, or, you know, sometimes you're studying and a friend comes up and they're really emotional. And what's important in that moment is being with that person. But the question is like, among all the craziest, like what's important right at the moment? So what we really like you guys to do is take a couple of minutes to think through a ritual. Again, one like maybe so easy that you wouldn't not do it, and write it down. So it's just a moment on any of the 4 elements, physical, emotional, mental, or your sort of sense of purpose, to write down one thing you could commit to doing for the next month. Let's go ahead and take a minute to do that.
Okay, does everyone have one or two? Okay. Now take a moment and turn to your neighbor next to you and share that ritual that you wrote down. All right. Hope you had fun with that. So now, keep those smartphones out and take the courage, be bold, and make that commitment and tweet it.
I mean, it's optional, but we'd love to see
it's
your
optional,
commitments.
But
just take a moment to share whatever it is, one small thing you've learned, and send that out in the world.
Should we hashtag it?
Yes, tag the conference as well.
yes, definitely.
All right, we are all confident in your abilities to tweet or not tweet if you so choose not to tweet. We just want to wrap up by expressing how thankful we are to be here because we are you too, right? Like it was not so long ago that we sat in these exact same shoes, and it's through a good amount of trial and certainly error that we've come to be where we are now. And so we hope that some of these hints that you guys know really early on in your careers are really helpful.
And hopefully you can take these as you transition to the workforce and make them a life skill set. So with that, thank you so much. Jamie and I were excited to be here with you today. And feel free to reach out to us at any time. There's our emails, we're up there. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, guys.